than any mountain. It carries within it mountains, forests, jungles, and all things of deep. Hubbard break the vision. Get thrown to ground. Yells none were supposed to know. Grabs me by the collar. Through gritted teeth and rage he says, "No one will ever believe you, my illusions are eternal." Get bitch slapped by L. Ron Hubbard so hard I fall to the ground. Hear violence and cacophony. Stand to my feet and open my eyes. In my garage. Pouring sweat. Realize I have to tell/x/ what's coming. Tell/x/ what's coming. What do? Diver and on again. Back with some more stories from my colleagues and friends around the world. Please sit around the campfire and enjoy a good old-fashioned thread. They don't make them like they used to. I post these threads regularly every Friday night, so be sure to check in for new stories every week. Have you heard of the raptures of the deep? Few people have. 30 meters below the surface, water pressure alters the properties of gases within the human body. What was once harmless or vital begins to poison your mind. The deeper the depth, the deadlier the poison becomes. Symptoms include impairment, euphoria, laughter, anxiety, hallucinations, hysteria, terror, and death. And yet, we still venture into these depths, risking our lives and minds. Delving into a place where the barrier between the mind and reality becomes thin. Those of us who return can bring with us only memories of that alien world beneath the waves. These are some of those memories. Tales from beyond the depths of madness. Tonight, I'm going to be shining a spotlight on an aspect of the ocean that usually flies under the radar. Something far deadlier than all the sharks, squids, and various denizens of the deep that somehow isn't nearly as widely known or feared. I am of course, talking about the currents of the ocean. If you've ever been surfing or spent any amount of time in the ocean, you will be able to appreciate what I'm talking about. Current is power in its most raw form. Inescapable, absolute. Once a current has grabbed you, there is no escape. Fighting will just exhaust your energy reserves and kill you quicker. There are many currents that are known, dangerous killers. What people never talk about are the phantom currents. Like rogue waves, these streams of water seemingly appear and vanish at will within the ocean, sucking divers and swimmers to their death without warning. Superstitious divers will often tell you, the sea isn't awake. She's asleep, dreaming. And she takes as much as she gives. I've had plenty of close calls and experiences with currents, some more harmless than others. The one I remember most clearly, oddly enough though, is the one where I was in the least danger. It was a normal night dive, as normal as dives at night can be. Anyone who has ever been on a night diver knows what I'm talking about. The darkness is so black, so complete that it consumes you. The way down is nothing but black abyss in every direction. It takes a lot of getting used to. It still freaks me out, even after I've done it over 100 times. Like most of my non-professional dives, this one was purely an exploratory one. The ocean and everything in it have always held a fascination for me. All sorts of stuff tends to accumulate at the bottom of the ocean, and I'm always trying to find it. My one rule is to look, but never take. The sea takes and gives in equal measure. If you take from her, she'll take from you. That might seem like a bunch of old sailor bullshit, but it has more truth to it than you might imagine. My discovery on that night came near the end of the dive, right before I was about to head back. Just as I'd made my mind up to return to the boat, I spotted something jutting out of the sea floor. It was a raft of sorts, improvised and constructed out of decrepit wooden boards and logs. A few objects lay nearby. An old disposable plastic water bottle. A plastic flip phone. 2 old flip-flops. A metal cooking pot. Some cloth sacks. A tiny bottle so overgrown with algae that the rubber nipple looked like a plant sprout. After investigating further, I found another raft. Then another. And another. Hundreds of rafts of various construction type, quality and decay. Many of them must have been hundreds of years old, if not older. One of the rafts had an old flintlock pistol set beside it, albeit rusted to such a degree it was nearly unrecognizable. The entire area was a massive underwater grave. That's the only way I can describe it. Just looking at it gave me chills. Not from danger, but from the profound nature of what I was witnessing. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of years of desperate, failed voyages on improvised craft collected in one area by an undersea current. I never found a single bone or body, just the remains of the craft that had sunk beneath. Like this are the very essence of why I take the risks of diving alone at night. Unknown, forgotten and unseen stories, lying silent at the bottom of the sea. Remnants of a life long since dead and gone, all hopes, dreams and experiences gone with it. I wish more than anything I could have spent longer down there poring over every raft, every item. But my oxygen was running out. And when I returned the next day to the exact same spot, I found nothing but sediment and bare seabed. The hole. This story comes from the father-in-law of a young diver that Frank trained. We'll call him Ibrahim. The area of the world Ibrahim is from has a long cultural history of diving, long preceding modern scuba gear. An entire culture developed over the ages of the songs and stories of the pearl divers, venturing into the depths in hope of finding hidden treasures. And like with all things, the sea gives and takes in equal measure. For every beautiful, luminous gem of the deep taken from her, the sea will take something in return. Sometimes a ring, an heirloom, a jeweled diving knife. Sometimes much more. There is one legend among these pearl divers that has apparently existed in one form or another since antiquity. The name is in their native language, but it roughly translates to the chasm or the hole. It's common to hear it referred to amongst pearl divers talking about a lost friend or comrade. The hole got him. So, what is the hole? It's not a place, apparently, so much as it is a thing. It supposedly appears without warning, silently sucks a victim into its gaping maw and vanishes without warning. The divers don't describe it as a creature, though they do speak as if it is a living thing. Descriptions of supposed survivors speak of a giant circular chasm opening beneath them in the sea floor, with a strong current sucking unfortunate divers down into its abyssal blue depths, never to be seen again. Top-rig trawler. This story comes from a former deckhand on a deep-sea trawler that did fishing off the coast of Australia. I get a lot of stories from that part of the world. Weird shit happens down under, it seems. We'll call our young intrepid deckhand Paul. He was trying to earn some quick money working on a fishing vessel, though his career was doomed to be short-lived. There's a couple details he described that are important to the story. This happened a while back, when Australian fishing was a booming business. Big money was being made, and lots of people wanted it. So it wasn't uncommon to see boats of various being converted into fishing trawlers. The problem with this, of course, being that the boats aren't designed to mount the heavy nets and fishing machinery used by a trawler. Paul never learned about this until after his ill-fated first voyage, otherwise he claims that no amount of money would have lured him on board. As he described it, the disaster struck on their very first haul. The official story is that their net hit a snag. It was Paul's first time, so it's hard to say whether or not his opinion has much merit. But in his opinion, something had grabbed the net and was pulling them down. And because the trawler was top-rigged as he described, the entire boat lurched over with the net and capsized in just a few moments. However, it wasn't the ship capsizing and sinking without warning that stuck with Paul the most. It was what happened after. He dove and swam for safety just in time to avoid being pulled down with ship. After taking a breath, he dove back down to see if there was anyone who could help. Most of the crew had surfaced already or were swimming up, but one man was swimming down, after the ship. He managed to grab the end of a trailing rope and began to pull himself down towards the ship as it rapidly sunk into the gloomy depths. He turned back to look at the surface before sinking out of sight for good. The man's face was etched with the most indescribable agony possible. Just by looking at his face, into those eyes, Paul said that he could feel that man's pain. The expression still haunts him to this day. The hopeless eyes, the agonized expression, hair swirling around as he sank further and further beyond the surface's light. Thanks to another nearby boat, almost all of the crew survived. There were only 2 fatalities. The captain, and his son. This next story is a pretty short one. Last one for the night, but I have a big juicy one that I'll be posting sometime tomorrow. Not sure when. I'm going fishing with a bunch of buddies. I'll try to write it up between bites. This is a story I've heard through the grapevine in various forms a bunch of times. I suspect it's a single story going through the telephone game over and over again, but it might have been several different stories with similar shared elements. The element that ties all of the stories is the one I started this thread out with. The divers are swimming somewhere out in the ocean, far from land. A current appears out of nowhere, sucking one of the divers downwards. It is so strong that the diver is pulled down out of sight within the space of less than 30 seconds, almost before the other divers can react. Some stories have divers vanishing from the middle of a group without a trace or anyone seeing them leave the group. The strangest thing about these stories is the extremely localized nature of the current, as it is almost always only a single diver that is sucked down while the others are unaffected. If I were to take a guess, it seems like some sort of strange localized whirlpool phenomenon caused perhaps by two massive underwater currents colliding with one another. I've certainly seen stranger things at those depths. If you enjoy Murray's stories, old cranky biologist who claims the black carpet ate his ROV, then you'll enjoy this one. I didn't know this until hearing this story, but Murray was a military diver during the Vietnam War, in a harbor clearing unit. They did salvage, recovery, repair, rescue, clearing minefields, etc. I don't think any description of mine could do justice to what he saw, so I'll jump straight into his story. I was young back then. Not young, I suppose. I didn't feel too young, but sure was a hell of a lot younger than now. I got signed up into the Frogmen. And it was, well, I sure was thankful to not be out with the rest of them boys being shot to shit by Charlie. And well, I wasn't too afraid of it. The depths, dark, whatnot. We had those back then. It was the circular masks, regulators and real big clumsy tanks. And it was maybe more primitive than what we got today. But it was really, even the worst missions, it wasn't too bad. And maybe I felt some guilt about that, because all them other boys were getting shot up by Charlie and me. My job wasn't nearly so dangerous. So that was why I guess, when they said there was a need for a volunteer from and mind you I was in the Harbor Clearing Unit, Harbor 1. So when they said that there was need for a volunteer from Harbor 1 for some mission on the mainland, well, I stood right up and said, yes sir, that's me. They flew me out on a Huey with a bunch of air mobile boys straight away after that. I went to grab my gear, but they said just get straight on the Huey and there'll be gear waiting. At the location, there'd be gear on location is what they said. I tried to chat up the air mobile boys on the way in, sort of suss out what the situation maybe was, but they were tight-lipped. In fact, I couldn't get nothing out of no one about the mission till I was right there. Some high-ranking guy with this hole in the ground. And it was one of them VC tunnels that you hear about sometimes from other GIs who were deployed out there. They'd run in their tunnel to hide, then pop out to shoot you in the back execution-like, and sometimes there'd be almost a whole city down there. They'd have dozens of tunnels and passages and rooms. There was so many of them that we had to have a whole division that was called the Tunnel Rats. Them Tunnel Rats was engineers. You think that'd be a pretty sweet gig, pretty safe. But those tunnel boys, they gave them a knife, pistol, a flashlight, and sent them down into these holes to clear out any VC that would be hiding down there. And they tried gas, they tried bombs, even flooding the tunnels. But Charlie was a clever devil, and he'd build a dozen different ways in and out with some sort of water, like locks that'd keep the bomb from collapsing the whole thing or filling up with water. So eventually they would just send one boy in there with a gun to clear it, and I guess if he didn't come out, then they send another one in there after him. Charlie would have all sorts of devilish traps in there, clever bastards they were. Spears through the walls, bamboo spikes, all manner of venomous creatures hidden. And all of that made for a hideously dangerous job of climbing in those tunnels. So when this Colonel Major whoever says to me climb in this hole, I tell him with all due respect to go fuck himself. I'm a frogman, not a tunnel rat. You sir can go fuck yourself is what I said. He says the tunnel got the all clear from the rats already, no traps or Charlie in there. And I was a bit suspicious about that, but they brought out the guy who cleared it and he told me that it was near as safe as a VC tunnel ever could be, though beyond a point they'd flooded it by accident or to cover their tracks. I don't think anybody was certain on that. So that was why they had needed me for the job. Colonel Major Sarge was of the mind that if the VC flooded themselves in or out, then there'd be valuable intel or something important hidden down at the bottom of that flooded tunnel. So they handed me a pistol and a rope to drag my gear behind with on account of how narrow